Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how I use this silence remover tool to automate a lot of the process for creating and editing YouTube videos that are educational. What this does is remove some of the pauses from the video, and it lets you speed up the pauses or delete the pauses. So these settings might be a little bit different for you depending on how much noise you have. This matters drastically. So I've been using 1.5, but today I had to bump it up to 2 for some reason, and it wasn't editing it properly and choosing the correct gaps when it was at 1.5. That might be because it's like 90 degrees. It feels like 100 degrees inside now. So I had the air conditioner on, which might have increased the noise a little bit. And then I guess it analyzes the noise, and I guess it detected a threshold. I don't know. Or if I try it again, 1.5 might actually work. So the noise level, that's pretty much how much noise is in the background. I'm using a very high quality microphone and I'm speaking about half an inch away from it. So there's hardly any noise at all. Minimum time, this is saying if there's 300 milliseconds of a pause, like that we're going to have. So like between here and here, this is like a couple seconds. So that's much more than 300 milliseconds. But if you find a smaller gap, like up here's 24 seconds and 15 frames. So this looks like 24 seconds or 10 frames or so, which is probably slightly over 300 milliseconds. So let's see, if it's 10 frames divided by 24 frames, so that's 416 milliseconds during this gap. So if I bump this up to, let's say 425, it will not count this as a gap. But if I change it back down to 400 or lower, it'll cut this out as a gap. But then the offset in out, that's going to leave a gap of 150 milliseconds. That's basically 4 frames. So it's going to detect the audio there. That's going to be the first frame of silence. So 1, 2, 3, 4 frames. So like right around here somewhere, it's going to say that, well, this is my in-out offset. And then it's going to do the same thing for here. So something like that. So this is going to be kept. And this part's going to be kept as well. And this part's going to be marked yellow and highlighted as silence. Sampling, you could do it anywhere between 10 and 50. That just says, okay, well, I'm going to check here. I'll check here. I'll check here. So the default, I believe, is 50. But if you change it to 10 milliseconds or so, it's basically checking every single frame. So that takes a little bit longer to run. Offset, I like between 100 and 150. So 100 is really good, but it makes you talk really quickly with no pauses in between sentences. Also, I noticed sometimes it was cutting off some of the last letters that I was saying when I was speaking a little slower. So it would cut off my S's, my T's, and a couple other letters. So like if I say snakes, the S at the end, or let's say I'll say laptops. So the S at the end of laptops, it sort of fades out. And if you put it at 100, let's say, it might cut off that last S if you speak it lightly or lower volume. If I say laptops really quick, it won't cut that off because I said the S at a higher volume. But if I say laptops and sort of fade out with low energy, it will cut that off. So to correct that, I bumped this up to 150. So this gives 150 millisecond pause in between my 2 clips. So basically it gives a little buffer in case my S's and other letters linger out. But if you do this, there's going to be a little more silence, exactly 50 milliseconds more of silence in between each clip. This is also good for sentences though, but it's not good, let's say, if you speak like this or have sentences with a few pauses in between. And a lot of times I ended up recording a little bit differently, knowing that I have this silence feature. So what I would do is I would say something and then it would pause just like that. And I can take as much time as I want to collect my thoughts. So I was just pausing to show you sort of how I might record, but I basically give as much time as I need to collect my thoughts so I can say exactly what I'm thinking without having to do a retake. And then I know during the editing process, this tool is going to cut out those silence parts, so I don't have to worry too much about them. And they're pretty easy and quick to delete. So these are usually my default settings. So let me show you how this works. You have a couple different options here. You can keep it to auto edit, and it's going to keep in the silence, but it'll just cut the silence parts out and change the labels. So usually what I do is I'll do each step in bulk. The first step, I'll go through all of my videos. So first I'll right click on my first video, click on new sequence from clip, and that will create a new sequence. And then I'll do the same thing for the second video, new sequence from clip. And I already did this for all of these other ones. So you can see how I have one sequence for each video. And this is what it looks like at the end. You have these blue clips.
I have a question about
and there's audio. And then the yellow clips don't contain any audio.
I have a question about if you ever have a question about how to use MidJourney, you have a couple different options. The first option is...
So you can see how it breaks up these spaces. So after the first step of creating a new sequence for each video, then you would go to the first sequence, and then first you would click into here to select the current sequence, and then you could click on prepare audio. Now, a lot of times this does not pop up and you need to click it twice. So what that did, it popped up this screen. Now this might appear in the background and you might not see it. So just remember, after you click this, if the choose folder doesn't pop up, well, click prepare audio again. And what that does, it makes Adobe Media Encoder pop up as well as this folder. But I just keep it set to my desktop and then click OK. And then you don't have to wait until this finishes. You could go to the next sequence. I guess you don't have to click in there, it automatically selects it. And then just click on prepare audio. So most of the time I just double click it and it opens. So choose folders there. I'll keep it to desktop, click on OK. So what it's doing, it's creating and extracting an MP3 file. So it's taking my entire video and it's extracting only the audio, which we're going to use in the next step. And then over here on my desktop, you can see these are all of the audio files that I extracted. They're all MP3s. So if we play one, you can see that they're audio. Most of that was silence.
Let's have a look. /show.
That's all that is. Now, after you extracted all of your MP3 files, and by the way, you need to keep all of the videos whole. The silence remover tool does not work if you split up the video. Like if you begin to edit it, and if it's like this, that will not work. So it has to be the full video. Then the next step that you do is click on choose file, and we're going to select the MP3 file. The MP3 file is named by default the name of your sequence, which here is Command Prefer Remix. And you can also see it here because I double clicked that. Choose my file, go to Command Prefer Remix. I gave it a second to load. Now I'm going to change this to 1.5, 300, 50 is fine, 150. Now I'll change to 69 gaps. So you know that these parameters loaded because the gaps changed. So now I'm going to click on Apply to Sequence. Now what it's doing is it's editing some of the clips and it's finished. So now if we zoom in, we can see that the blue has audio clips and the yellow does not. So if we play it,
Mix mode does is affect how these two buttons work. So if I type in very strong, it's going to automatically generate a new image.
So that's how it works. And then we can go to the next sequence. I'll click on choose file. Now make sure that you click choose file again, because if you keep the MP3 as the previous video, well, it's going to edit this current sequence incorrectly based on your other video. So this time I'll click Command Settings. And this one's going to take a little longer because it's not 5 minutes, it's closer to 20 minutes. And then I'm going to click on Apply to Sequence, and it's going to edit this one. Now, if you save the Premiere Pro project file, it doesn't work. The silence remover doesn't work anymore. So after you save Premiere Pro, you have to close it out, open it back up, choose the audio file, and then change these 4 settings again, and then click on Apply to Sequence, and then it will work. Also, sometimes if you edit 3, 5, or 10 sequences in a row using the silence remover, well, this button will stop working. Other times, like if you click this a bunch of times trying to get it to work, it'll edit the video, but then it'll continue to edit the video again and again and again, and it'll just make it hours long. And that's because I feel like something's causing the silence remover plugin to freeze, and you click it a couple times and it's not doing anything. Even after 5 minutes you click it, it still doesn't do anything. Well, eventually it might start working, but then because you clicked it so many times, it's going to run for each time that you clicked it. So the quickest way that I found is that you just edit one video, save it, close it out, open it up, edit the next video, save it, close it, open it up, and repeat. Or do what I just did here, where you edit one sequence, go to the next sequence, edit that, go to the next sequence, edit that, and do like 5 of them, and then save it. But don't save it in between editing each sequence or you'll have to close it. I like to edit about an hour or 2 of video at once and then save it and then close it and open it back up. So after this is done editing, I'll show you the next steps on how I use these two different types of files. It always has a message box that pops up that says finish. So the first thing that I have custom shortcuts. If you go to edit, keyboard shortcuts, these are how my shortcuts are mapped. Let me point out, I use Z, speed duration, D for ripple delete, C for, this is like the cut tool, except instead of having to click, it just automatically cuts all of the tracks that are selected. Zoom out, zoom in, which is plus and minus, and then zoom to sequence, which is the backslash. Those are all my main ones. These two I use all the time. The ripple, trim, previous edit to playhead, which is Q, and I have ripple, trim, next edit to playhead, which is W. Oh, and close gap you need, I mapped it to G. And I also use V a lot, the selection tool, and S, which selects the clip where the playhead or the cursor is. Those are the most important shortcuts. And then for editing, I also mapped a couple of macros. This software came with my PC, but you could download another similar application that can automate keyboard and mouse strokes. Basically, I have mapped to F1. It changes the speed of everything, of all the clips, to 100. F2 changes the speed to 200. So here, just typing in 200 and hitting enter. F3 is 300. F4 is 400. And then I have 500% to F6 because I use F5 so much for like running code or refreshing a browser. I have ripple delete mapped to F7. It selects videos under my playhead and then does a ripple delete. So the next step, we would need to prepare the clips to get ready to edit them. I'll right click a yellow clip, go to label, select label group, drag up, make sure the frame's at 0, drag down, make sure the frame change is also at 0. I'll push backspace to fit all of the clips to my timeline. Click in this open area and then hit Control A to select all. Hold Control L to unlink all of the clips. I'll drag audio track 2 and delete all of the silenced audio clips. You can either right click on the clip again on the yellow clip and go to label, select label group. This time I'm just going to drag the clips to show you how you can do it either way, just as easy. So all of the silenced video tracks are now selected. I'm going to hit Z. Now this time I'm going to increase the speed to 200. So you might want to edit it and start it off at speed of 200 and then increase it up. That's the method that I usually use. So now we're at 4 minutes and 5 seconds. I'm going to click in the blank area to unselect all the tracks, hit G to close the gaps. And now we just went from 4 minutes and 5 seconds to about 3 minutes. So we cut out about 1 minute of silence, or 25% of the video. It's pretty good. Now I'm going to hit plus to zoom in a little bit. If it's a small clip, I'll go and hit left and right to sort of take a look and see if the frame is moving or not. So let me click F7. A lot of times also, if it's like a little tiny frame like that, I'm just going to delete it. I don't care if the mouse moves a little tiny bit. It's not worth my time to review that. You can see it's typing here. So if I zoom in, here it's typing. So I'm not going to delete that. And usually, instead of messing with the speed now, I like to go through the whole sequence first, delete all the clips that are not moving. So I can quickly just scroll through here. I can see that's not moving. I hit F7. You can also make this a lot larger. And I also like to edit with 2 monitors. I'm just editing on one just for the tutorial. And that barely moves. That doesn't move. That moves, so I'm keeping it. That's tiny, so I'm not even going to bother looking at it. That's so tiny. That moves, I'm keeping it. That moves, I'm keeping it. That doesn't move, it's getting deleted. And so on. That's tiny. I'm not even looking at it. That moves. This is tiny. I won't even look at it. That moves. That moves. That one moves too. That doesn't move. That's getting deleted. Doesn't move. Too tiny. I'm not even looking at it. That moves. It. Too tiny. That moves. That moves. That moves. This moves. Okay, so that's a minute of footage. So for step 2, after I delete all of the video clips that don't move, now I'm going to go through all the clips and speed them up. So they're already sped up at 200. All of the yellow tracks are sped up by 2 times. You could see, oh, well, it's not doing anything from here, this frame, that frame, that frame, that frame. So all these frames, they're not doing anything. That's one way to go about it. If you're creating a very professional video that you're selling for a course for, let's say, Udemy. So for this video, I might actually delete those frames. But let's say I'm just creating a very quick YouTube course and you don't want to spend a lot of time on it, well, it's okay if some of the frames are blank. But this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 frames. So it's like almost a third of a second. So I'm going to hit speed it up, let's say 3 times. I don't want to make it too fast because it is typing, but it went from 200% to 300. Now I'm going to go through this. So you're not really typing anything. It's just the MidJourney bot is just loading data. So I'm going to hit F6 and it's going to speed it up by 5 times. And that you can follow that. And I'm hitting the down arrow to go to the next clips. Same thing, it's just loading. I'll speed it up 500%. So this is typing, so I might keep it at 200%, or I might speed it up at 300% if it were YouTube. This, I don't know. Sometimes I just guess 300%, but also I feel like it's kind of long, so I'll just increase it to 400%. This, it's not really doing anything, so I'll increase it to 500%. Same thing with this. And I'll do that at 400%. And I'm just using my gut to tell me like, well, how fast do I think this should be? I would have chose this at 500% if just one thing were loaded, but it looked like there were 3 things. The menu popped up, this other piece of information loaded, and then the settings loaded. So that's a lot of information to see. It's just the mouse that's moving. It's not important. So I'll just hit F6 to increase it to 500%, and then it cuts it down to like a couple frames. Same thing with that. The mouse is just moving a little. Same thing. I don't really like the mouse to be moving all over the place, but you can see it's clicking a button and then it's moving out of the way. So all you're trying to do is just get the mouse out of the way in the shortest amount of frames. It would be different if the mouse is moving around for like 2 minutes. Then you might not want to make it that fast or just cut it out. Here, I don't know, 500%, 400% because it's typing. You can even do it. I'll change that to 300% actually because it's just only typing and it's short. That's going, I'm typing pretty slow, so I'll put that to 500% and it's just typing a letter. This looks pretty large, taking up about 10 seconds. So I'm going to manually edit this a little bit. So I'm just going to cut this out. Let's see, I'll cut it out there. I'll add in 2 frames. I'll hit C, and then I'll go all the way over here, right before the image loads. So they don't really need to see the image loading. So I'll just pop it up there. And they don't need to see it disappearing and then loading again. So I'm just going to cut this. I'll keep like 2 frames. I'll keep another frame there for loading, 2 frames, whatever. And then now it's loaded. So I'm going to cut out all of this stuff that's loaded. And the rest of this doesn't move, except here it starts to move. So I'll cut that. Now this, I want to, you can either cut this out or you can just speed it up to 3,000. That's too much. 1,000. So now if we close the gap, I'll just play it back.
Space. And now
we took 10 seconds down to about a second, and it does the same thing.
Space.
The image pops
and now
up. And then we don't need to even display this because it's showing for 2 seconds here. So you have 2 seconds of the image loaded here, another second there. So 3 seconds is a good enough time to take a look at this image. And then you could do the same thing for this clip. So let's say you don't want to spend all the time editing it manually like I did, and this would be a good example. Here, I'm going to hit F6, and it's going to increase it to 500%. And if I play it back...
Space. And now let's upscale this one.
I mean, that's pretty good. And now, for the last step, notice how I didn't close the gap. I could have went here and clicked delete. Well, I guess I would have had to go up here. I guess drag these to the same track, and then you hit delete, and then it closes the gap. I could drag that. I messed it up. I could drag it down and hit delete. Instead of doing that, watch, I'm just going to do the same thing we did before, is click here to deselect all the tracks and just hit G. And what that did, it just closed the gap for all of the edits that I just made. So now there are no gaps. And if I go to the end, from editing those 55 seconds of footage, well, it knocked off another 15 seconds. Now let's see what the first, I guess, like 45 seconds or so looks like.
Now we're going to have a look at the remix mode. There's 2 ways how to toggle this on and off. You could either type in prefer remix, and it just toggled it off, and it just toggled it on. And then you could type in settings. And
so that was something that I corrected myself. I would have to go back and delete that first part.
And clicking this button does the same thing. So if I type in prefer remix, notice how it's on because the button's highlighted. Now turned off. So if I type settings again, now the remix mode button is not highlighted green, so it's turned off. And you could also toggle it back on or off. So let's have a look at how the buttons coming up react with the remix mode turned off. We'll start off by typing imagine, and let's type dog in space. And now let's upscale this one. Now over here, we have...
So that looked pretty smooth, and we hardly did any type of editing. It was just deleting some of the stuff and increasing the speed of some of the stuff and then closing the gaps. And if we take a look at the original video, let's go to the beginning, a project. I'll add a new sequence so you can hear the audio. And I'll just cut it. So it looks like it was right about there. This is only like 35 seconds or so. Well, here's 49 seconds. So that dog appears at 47 seconds. And here the dog appears at 1 minute and 32 seconds. So they're the same clips. Now let's play it back before editing the silence parts.
Now we're going to have a look at the remix mode. There's two ways how to toggle this on and off. You could either type in prefer remix, and it just toggled it off, and it just toggled it on. And then you could type in settings, and clicking this button does the same thing. So if I type in prefer remix, notice how it's on because the button's highlighted. Now turned off. So if I type settings again, now the remix mode button is not highlighted green, so it's turned off.
So I'm not going to play the whole thing, but you can see how we took this large clip, 1 minute and 30 seconds. We're saying the same exact information crammed into 47 seconds, but only the parts of the video that are not really doing much are cut out. Now, let me show you how quick it is to edit the rest of the video. I'm not going to say anything, so this is the end of the tutorial, but you could just see if I want to get rid of the last couple of minutes, I'm going to do that now. So this is how I might go about editing this on my own to edit this video in just a couple minutes.
No.
Okay, let me start now.
Same thing. Now we're going to have this is and this one's the subtle version.
And then I'll hit G. So we started at like 5 minutes. Now the whole video is down to just 2 minutes. Pretty cool. Okay, thanks for watching.
Coder Fairy.
Coder Fairy. CoderFairy.com. Automate it with AI.